able to persevere.
Yeah, we're back up.
Come back.
Yeah, we're back now. Although the CPU is a little high. Um, says perfect streaming though.
I don't see the live.
You should see it live here in a second because we were Jim Fetzer. Okay, are you there now? Can you see yourself?
I can see me. There we go. Now we're on the air, Bill.
Okay, yeah. So the real issue I think is that we need to be neither lumpers nor splitters. We need to be discerners. And for example, naturally, we should be allies of Russia and Iran. We should excoriate relationships with nations that push Wahhabism, which Bashar al-Assad, who's an eye doctor trained in Britain, the head of Syria, says, and this is interesting, the people that are Jews in Syria say they can sit down at the table with Christians, Orthodox Christians, with Shiite and Sunni, because they all get along in Syria. The same way it was a delegation that went to Iran to try to get the Jews to leave Tehran, and they say, are you kidding? We've been here for many, many centuries. We get along with people. We have businesses here. We're doing fine. Thank you. Leave us alone. So what people don't understand is the Jews in Iran are perfectly happy. Perfectly happy. And we don't have that situation in Saudi Arabia, because in Saudi, if you set up a place of worship in Saudi, you're going to be beheaded or you're going to get persecuted in prison. So it's a totally different thing. And we've made alliances with the dark side. And that dark side didn't originate, by the way, in the Middle East. That dark side originated in London, England, by the British Empire, who was using these empiric tactics to radicalize Islam as a tool for them. So it's not surprising that high-level Masons like Albert Pike make statements like he did about the fact that, in fact, Islam is a tool for globalism, and eventually they want the West to actually wipe out much of Islam, or most of the people, because that's part of their game. It's amazing, isn't it?
Well, for additional developments in the Middle East, take a look at slide number 10. Well, we have the shooting of the Russian ambassador to Turkey being assassinated on live television by a man who had been a part of the Turkish riot police, as I understand it, for at least 10 years,
Right.
who called out Allah Akbar when he shot him and said, remember Aleppo. There are questions about the authenticity of the shooting, as there are about the truck attack in Berlin that I will mention. But if you go to the next slide, Vladimir Putin is very keen to know who gave the orders. I think we can fashion some hypotheses as we proceed, but that they're not going to make Vladimir Putin very happy with the Central Intelligence Agency. In slide 12, we find that we have this Berlin terror attack, which has many signs of being a contrived event. For example, the identity papers of the alleged terrorists were found in the cab itself. That's a bit of a stretch. It's rather like the passport of one of the alleged terrorists surviving the destruction of the Twin Towers. A little too convenient.
Yeah.
If you go to the next slide, 13, Trump lashes out at radical Islamists following the murder of the Russian envoy in the Berlin truck attack. He's, of course, many times observed that Barack Obama has been unwilling to use the phrase radical Islamic terrorism, and I think we're going to have an explanation in a few minutes as to why that's been the case. If you go to slide 14, we find that Berlin dashcam footage suggests that the whole hoax here was, in fact, another staged event, rather like in Nice, where we had a previous truck attack where allegedly 84 people were mowed down by a truck that wasn't even lawfully allowed in that part of the city, and where there was no blood on the vehicle. If you compare it with, say, a truck that hit a single deer,
Right.
you find there's a lot of blood, but not on this truck. And in fact, when we did a close scrutiny, the bodies in the street were mannequins, as well as at least one pig that had been gutted for the sake of blood. If you go to the next slide then, Bill, we do have a bona fide shooting of a Russian foreign ministry senior official, which is going to cause a lot of concern. And the last slide.
No, that was in Russia, though, right? That was the one, the foreign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here in the last slide, we have a report that ISIS is preparing a hit list of Russian diplomats, no doubt, at least officially, in retaliation for the Russian intervention in Syria. which has been decisive in destroying the ISIS movement there, which, by the way, was made in the USA.
Yeah, now the thing is, with Donald Trump, if there's a sharing with Russia and our other allies, because we should be direct allies with Russia on this, and we shared metadata, we'd be able to target them in three ways. First off, we cut off all their transactions. Secondly, we can send in Delta and Special Ops and even not only air drones, but robotic drones in to murder these people. And third, we have space-based weapons that can actually target a building and kill everyone in it. So there really is no reason why they should have breath or a pulse. And that means a financial pulse. When we have G20 nations buying the oil from ISIS, it's because NATO and the United Nations and the United States agrees to buy the oil, and they won't bomb even the oil wells because it's an environmental hazard, which is ridiculous. So the real issue here comes down to the fact that the Russians bombed, for example, the 800 car or truck convoy coming out of Syria across the Turkish territory, and it was in fact Erdogan's son that was actually involved with one of the oil companies actually doing the exchange of oil and selling it through the G20 nations. So what I see happening is dirty dealing going on, and finally I think Erdogan is getting the message that if you don't realign with Russia, your nation will be finished. And this operation to kill the Russian ambassador has all the markings of CIA on it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, and indeed that's where we're going. In relation to the next set of slides, the Russian ambassador assassinating, assuming it was real retaliation, but by whom? In slide 19, the question arises, are the neocons dispatching assassins, given that their power, they're losing their grip with a Donald in the new administration? In slide 20, Stephen Lenman, who's a geopolitical expert analyst, suggests that the Berlin market attack appears to have been a CIA false flag. But here, 21, by far the most important story of them all, Wayne Madsen has outed John Brennan as a Saudi and Islamic State mole. There's a reason why CIA Director John Brennan has done everything possible to interfere with President-elect Donald Trump, taking the reins of the presidency on January 20th. As a mole for the Saudi royal family and a convert to Wahhabist Islam, Brennan has no desire to see certain individuals who are well aware of his Islamist beliefs ascend to positions of power in the U.S. intelligence community. The greatest threat to Brennan coming from retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, formerly the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, to become Trump's national security advisor, where in 2014 Flynn was fired as director of the DI by President Obama, who had been advised by Brennan to dump him because the DI director was producing intelligence policy documents showing it was a mistake and against U.S. security interests to support Syrian jihadists who are trying to topple Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. For Brennan, Saudi, and Wahhabist controllers, that was tantamount to blasphemy. If you go to the next slide, you see a nice...
totally makes sense.
Yeah, I want to hear your comments on this after I do two more slides here, Bill. Here's just an image that ties together a lot of different considerations where Wayne Madsen, now in slide 23, has also determined that Saudi intelligence tried to toss the election to Hillary, that we've had all the charges of election tampering, election fraud, hacking, and so forth, but they were bogusly directed at Russian interference, and including attempts to persuade electors not to vote for Trump. A congressional election is going to review, but as he points out in his slide number 24 shows, it turns out there's an unusually close bond between John Brennan and Barack Obama, which Madsen suggests, in fact, asserts that it's because Obama is also himself a Muslim and Brennan, of course, a Muslim, which explains why he's been unwilling to use the phrase Islamic Muslim terrorist, which is contrary to the tenets of Islam, and why he's destroyed the Muslim registry, even though it appeared to be highly appropriate in the wake of the events of 9/11, although the claim that those atrocities were perpetrated by 19 Islamic terrorists are demonstrably false.
Yeah, I know. In fact, even the Saudi king himself this last summer made a statement that 9/11 was a self-inflicted wound by America on itself. That's the king,
That's
actually.
right. That's right. That was in the wake of the release of the 28 pages that have been redacted, which are about Saudi financing, and the Congress was providing a bill which has now become law, allowing citizens to sue Saudi Arabia for its involvement in 9/11. That pissed off the king so much that he actually blurted out the truth that the U.S. had attacked the U.S. on 9/11.
Right. Wow. What I want to do too, because we had a break, is I want to return to some of those early slides. Can we do that right now, so we can go right back to the beginning and cover some of this again? Because I want to make sure it's all in the same video, rather than in two different videos. We'll see if we can reintroduce some of these topics. The fact that America abstained from the vote was good in a sense, but they should have actually vetoed this vote against Israel. I agree with one statement by Netanyahu that it should be the internal parties that deal with this. The problem is, though, that most of our intelligence agencies are fully infiltrated by Israel, and most of our congressmen have been threatened by Israel and senators. So Israel actually makes and controls policy inside America, which has got to stop. They not only put us in danger, but they also put themselves in danger because Israel's made dark alliances with Saudi Arabia. People don't know this on the surface, but Saudi and Israeli agents actually have dual agency. And in a sense, Wahhabism is in a sense protected, and people may not know this even inside the state of Israel, is protected by America and the West. They protect Wahhabism, which is the dangerous version of Islam that is the opposite of Shiite Islam, which is why the imams have never done any terrorism against the West. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is, Bill. It's stunning.
It's stunning, yeah. And then we have here, of course, Obama's Christmas gift, the anti-propaganda bill. We talked about this, about the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act. And, of course, the real danger here is they want to actually have a bill to criminalize fake news. What are the consequences going to be? Do they say in the bill? Are you going to go to prison? Are they going to shut down your website? What's their plan of action?
Well, we're returning to that at the end, Bill. I have a series of other stories elaborating
yeah,
on this
and
theme.
then we'll get into that.
It's blatantly unconstitutional as a violation of the First Amendment,
Right.
and the idea that Barack Obama should be signing such a bill is such a clear violation of his oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's a shameless act of treason.
Well, Obama has, there's two Obamas. There's a late night TV host Obama that's personable, easy to get along with, funny, low cadence, neurolinguistic programming, that the majority of Americans that don't think, even if they had to, think he's okay. I think there's a 57% approval. Then there's what I call the monster Obama. And you have to see not what he's saying, but like a magician, what he's doing. This is probably one of the worst presidents we've ever had. He's so anti-constitutional. He's a Saudi plant, and he's actually a danger to the Constitution. And this act is a good example of his behavior, getting rid of the metadata on the Saudis and the Muslims inside America, passing a bill like this. And obviously, one of the very first things that Donald Trump's going to do is get his pen out and X out all of these crazy bills that he's passed, including new regulations that's strangling industry. And then you had a discussion here about 81% of Muslims surveyed support Islamic State. Now, what was the website addressed again?
MuslimStatistics.blogspot.com.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
And then, of course, if we look at some of these slides, we've got the majority of rapes are committed by 2%. Now, if you did genetic screening like my son Matthew, who's an expert on forensic psychiatry on this and forensic criminal activity, there's two genes, the monoamine oxidase gene and the gene for tryptophan. If you screen these people, you'd find a very high incidence of genetic disorders that are tied to violent behavior in the amygdala or the rage control nucleus in the brain. And we see this also pushing Sharia law and also abusing their own people, like abusing women. So, a vast majority of 51% of American Muslims, of our own homegrown 9.7 million Americans, support Sharia law. That's anti-constitutional. And that's why I personally don't think Islam, even in its milder forms, can mix with America, except from places where you know that they're not going to push Sharia. I don't think that in a place like Iran, they push Sharia when Jews say, "Don't leave us alone, Jewish people from Israel. We're doing just fine here in Iran," and for many centuries. Obviously, the Jews have their synagogues in Tehran, and they're perfectly happy. So why don't we get this news from the West? Because they don't want to tell you that the Jews that live in Tehran are doing business and happy, and the Jews could not even visit and have a mosque, have a synagogue in Saudi Arabia, because it's a completely different version of Islam, and people need to know that. They need to know what's really going on. And of course, this is of course talking about the Russian ambassador to Turkey, and
No, you skipped the most important one in that slide set, Bill. Go back.
yeah,
Where Obama has shut down the Muslim track. No, after that, yes,
yeah.
has shut down the Muslim tracking system set up in the wake of 9/11 to make it impossible for Trump to take advantage of the information already gathered. It's an act he's taking because of his own Muslim roots. I'm convinced of that now. And Wayne Madsen has confirmed it.
I'm certain that data exists somewhere and can be resurrected, though, right?
Yeah, well, I agree with you, but he's doing his best to get rid of it.
Well, I think what it does is it just proves that the man is a phony. It's my belief system that he is not an American. He applied to Occidental University in California as a foreign student. It's my feeling that much of the things about Obama is completely fake, including his fake family. I know a lot of people think it's an insane conspiracy theory to think that Michelle Obama is a tranny or transvestite, and that she's a male, which I think there's some pretty good evidence of that, biometrics of the hands and everything else. And then we know that the two children, and you've shown evidence, we even know the probable parents of these two girls that were adopted. This is a completely...
Well, Michelle has a package that most women do not have. In fact, coming off a plane recently, the wind blew her dress up against it. It popped out, and Obama thought that was very funny and laughed. You can find it online. Michelle pops out, and Obama laughs.
Yeah. Wow. So, and then, of course, we see the situation of the terror attack in Berlin, and this also has some markings that suggest with the German ID, finding the ID of the man that committed this act. It's very much like the Senarov brothers are being monitored for several years by the FBI, and we know that this was a massaged and controlled act. The marathon, the marathon bombing in Boston had a lot of similarities to this German truck attack, doesn't it?
Yes. And of course, that was completely fraudulent in Nice. There was no blood on the front of the vehicle compared to, say, a truck that hit a single deer. There were supposed to be 84, 85 victims. We did, on close inspection, discover they were using mannequins. They did have a pig that had been gutted to create some blood there, but it was a completely manufactured scene, a total false flag in Nice.
Do the Germans know this, Germany, or because the German media has also tried to introduce a bill to stop fake news, also they call it, where we actually pull out questions and evidence that suggests that the regular narrative put through the regular media is a lie.
Yeah, you should go to the next slide, by the way, because that's the one that's focusing on it having been a hoax. Well, if they were actually to enforce it, they'd put their major media out of business, because those are the sources. The alternative media has a much higher batting average when it comes to reporting accurate and truthful stories about events like Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, and a whole host of others.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is, of course, this Russian foreign minister. Now, this minister that died in I think, Moscow, do you have an expanding story on that? Because the timing seems to be awfully close to the death of this so-called minister who was trying.
Well, I suspect it was done in close proximity to create ambiguity, because if somebody saw a headline about a Russian minister being assassinated, they'd assume that they meant in Turkey, but in fact this was in Moscow, as you correctly discerned.
Right.
And that,
just to lend to confusion, in other words.
Something's going on here.
Yeah. Let's go up to this other set of slides that we can move to next now. This is about Clinton Democratic build a mine palace.
Well, it's very strange. This is an excellent article observing that only a short time ago, many on the left hated the CIA, thought the American intelligence service was evil, a vast bureaucracy bent on destabilizing other governments and engineering foreign elections. Many now see the CIA as a champion because it's claiming Russia hacked the election. They're looking for an excuse. The 1980s are now calling for ask for their foreign policy back. President Obama famously quipped at a 2012 challenger, Mitt Romney, who dared suggest Russia was a problem because the Cold War's been over for 20 years. Completely bizarre that the Democrats are now favoring the CIA and regarding Russia as evil, because up until the election, when Brennan started promoting the idea that Russia had hacked the election to cause Hillary to lose to favor Trump, they were actually very open about Russia and very opposed to the CIA. So there's a kind of schizophrenia that's taken over the Democratic Party. It turns out, if you look at the next slide, by the way, 27, that there's more proof of the theft of the election for Hillary. It just didn't pan out. Turns out 37% of precincts had more votes than there were voters in 37 precincts in Detroit. I mean, this is outrageous. If you look at slide 28, here I'm mentioning that I interviewed this brilliant statistician and expert on the theft of elections, slide 28, Bill, by the name of Richard Charnon on my show, The Raw Deal, which you can find, go to the rentsradio.com, and then go for the archives of The Raw Deal to 1 December, where Charnon pointed out that he's the only expert to have predicted correctly the electoral vote for Obama in 2008, for Obama in 2012, for Trump in 2016, and that based upon his scrutiny of the outcomes that the election had been rigged for Hillary, but that was simply too massive a vote for Trump to overcome it, that at least 7 states that were given to Hillary actually were won by Trump, including New Hampshire, Colorado, and Nevada. The next slide shows how the Democrats have just fallen short in trying to convince Americans about who is responsible for the election. 71% don't believe Russia hacked the election. Look at all the reasons that are given why Hillary lost. Uneducated voters, racists, Russia, Comey, third parties, electoral college, alt-right, hack machines, fake news, Russia again. They never considered that she was a terrible candidate, that she had a history of corruption, that she'd abused her position as Secretary of State, that the Clinton Foundation was used as a money machine. They're in a state of denial. And if you look at slide 30, you see all the more reason to recognize the Democrats are deceiving themselves. They've completely lost contact with reality. Even Loretta Lynch has acknowledged that we saw no evidence that Russia violated the integrity of the U.S. election system. Slide 31 is a perfect illustration of the overdue of the propaganda coming from, in this case, the New York Times, because they talk about a Patriot News Agency website that's supposed to have just popped up in June and supposed to be disseminating fake news on behalf of Russia, which is, because there's a link to a Russian website, the equivalent of Facebook. They claim it's a clue that Patriot News, that many sites had appeared out of nowhere and pumped out pro-Trump hoaxes, tying his opponent Hillary Clinton to Satanism, pedophilia, and other conspiracies, is actually run by foreigners. This is another of their efforts to try to dispel all the evidence that's emerging about Pizzagate, which actually originated in emails released by WikiLeaks related to John Podesta. So if you look at the next slide, Bill, it's hardly surprising that Podesta is now demanding the intel on Russia's efforts to get Trump elected, to distract attention from the fact that these emails, none of which has ever been contested. WikiLeaks has a 100% authenticity rating for releasing accurate emails, where the study of these emails has led to the revelations now known as Pizzagate, where John Podesta appears to be the pedophile in chief, where Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and a vast number of others in the American government appear to be implicated in these activities. It's completely outrageous. Whereas I reported last week, did an interview with Jim Rothstein, who was a New York City Gold Shield detective who'd cracked many pedophile cases, and when I shared with Rothstein some of the revelations coming from the Podesta emails and research based upon them, he said he was unsurprised that based upon his experience, as much as 70% of the American political elite in the United States is engaged in pedophilia. So we seem to have the tip of the iceberg here, Bill,
Yeah.
with the Podesta emails, and this is not going to go away. I've said before, I say again, this is going to prove to be the greatest scandal in American political history.
Yeah, and now there's three reasons why pedophilia is so ingrained into the control system of our politics, not just here but around the world. The first is to compromise people. The second is to sear their conscience. And the third is a religious one, where it opens them up to being literally controlled and hacked into their consciousness and their actions. So some people might call that possession. I believe that this ancient technology is something that has been used by the global elite for thousands of years to control the populations through controlling our leaders. Let's look at the next set of slides. DC Pizzagate.
Well, here we have further developments related to Pizzagate. For those who are novices, unfamiliar with the territory, here's an excellent primer. DC Pizzagate, a primer updated 12/24 about every week. This introduction to Pizzagate is being updated. If you go to 35, InfoWars, Alex Jones may or may not be in serious danger, but there's all this evidence about, from these pizzerias, such as Comet Ping Pong Pizza right in Washington, D.C., that they use symbols on their menus, for example, that are associated with pedophilia.
Well,
there's a whole lot more there.
Well, what's the story regarding Alex? Why is he in danger, and why are they calling him a patsy, or what's the story?
Well, that's when I need to further research, Bill. I'll come back on that. But anyone who's talking about Pizzagate can be smeared. That's going to be a major technique. Look at the slide 36. Miley Cyrus has done a whole lot about Pizzagate. It's really weird. If you look at several videos involving her, and they're easily found on the internet, it looks as though she was one of the children who has been abused as she was growing up, which frankly would be no surprise. She comes off as really extreme in her graphic sexual poses and presentations, and the fact she's gone bananas on Pizzagate suggests she was a victim thereof. Here's another that's really striking. This is in one of an introduction to Pizzagate, What We Know Now, hashtag Pizzagate, What We Know Now, and others. Barack Obama spent about $65,000 of taxpayer money flying pizza/dogs in from Chicago for a private party at the White House. Now they're not talking about ordinary pizza pies or ordinary hot dogs. Those are slang for girls and boys being flown in from Chicago at taxpayer expense by Barack Obama. This is indicative of how far this goes.
Wow.
Slide 38 now. Get this, Bill. Talk about your absurdity. Foes of Russia say now that child porn is being planted to ruin them. Look at side 39. Pizzagate, Russia did it. Now the mainstream media claim Russians are planting child porn on their foes' computers. And look at this, number 40. Trump's friend Russia is accused of planting child porn on foes' computer. And here you get an overall summary in slide number 41. The FBI tipped Norway to a pedo ring. The pedo ring was busted, widely reported in Norway. The CIA, Clinton, the New York Times, Washington Post shut it down, called it fake news. Clinton now says Russia is going to plant child porn. They're playing us for idiots, Bill. They must think we're complete and total morons to believe this kind of nonsense, which they're recycling over and over again. Oh, I thought you might want to comment on those, but
okay, I think the thing about Pizzagate that I can see, it's evolving. The information is starting to gel. What I think people know, and we talk about this with Leo Lyons-Zagami, who's our expert on the high-level Illuminati, on Thursday's first hour on the Nutrimedical Report show. What people need to understand, why is it such a high percentage? Because of those three things I mentioned. But it also means that the globalists that are tied directly to this kind of evil are in panic mode. They realize someone like Donald Trump and the public are waking up, not just in America, but Europe and worldwide. Satanism, pedophilia, globalism population reduction, fake environmentalism are all tied together into one horrifying bundle. And what people need to understand is there's direct connections here with why Wahhabism and a Wahhabistic version of Islam is also tied to the form of globalism and Satanism. So what I see happening, all this is being exposed by we're the real media. The irregular media, as far as I'm concerned, are already dead. They're like that bull elephant shot in the head. They don't realize they're dead, but they're in 5 miles, they're going to face plant by the river, and that's the last of them. So what I see happening, this latest bill that Obama stuck into the Defense Authorization Act of 2017 for $611 billion for the military, this bill is going to end up in the Supreme Court, and it's going to end up killing either government actions to try to suppress citizen journalists. It's also going to kill the idea that the regular media is going to be trusted by the public in any way, shape, or form, or false government statements by any future administrations if they're non-Trump-like. Because as far as I'm concerned, the Democratic Party has committed political hari-kari. They're finished now. That's why the number of governors, state legislators, senators, congressmen has dropped. And as far as I'm concerned, the generational power of the Democrats, they need to refound the party, just like Trump blew up the Republican Party, and much of the old guard who are against Trump, never Trumpers, they're finished. So we have a new Republican Party under Trump, and the Democrats need to get with the program and make a new Democratic Party.
I think those are all excellent comments. In fact, Vladimir Putin has responded. He had a very long press conference in the last few days and said, am I also responsible for all the loss of the state legislatures and the loss of the houses and the members of the House and loss of the Senate seats? I mean, it's all completely ridiculous. Here's an indication of why the mainstream media's credibility has gone into the toilet. This is a very nice montage about how badly the media failed with a top 10 list. Number one being all the reports that Hillary will win in a landslide using padded polls that had been deliberately contrived by oversampling Democrats, women, and liberals. Here's a nice highlight, including NBC host Lester Holt, telling Hillary Clinton he winced after an audience member at a forum asked Hillary if she was dishonest. Holt's hard-hitting question to Hillary was, do you get your feelings hurt sometimes? To me, it's outrageous that Lester Holt is still hosting, anchoring NBC News, because Lester Holt sent the questions for the debate he was going to moderate to Hillary's campaign manager a week in advance. He had an arrangement with her where when she rubbed her face, he attacked Trump and then threw it over to Hillary with no intervening questions so she could deliver a patented zinger. That he is still on the air is outrageous and speaks to the absence of integrity of NBC News.
Well,
Slide 44.
Well, he's a prostitute, and he's a prostitute-journalist as well. Prostitute-journalist.
No doubt about it. Here, slide 44 is again the story you've been emphasizing, that the NDAA fake news sites are going to be subject to treason investigations. And in fact, this slide 45 shows they're already going about doing it. They're shutting down the alternative media. They're blocked, locked, hacked. It's going on right and left. Here in slide 46, the U.S. plans to put state-sponsored media under full federal control. Here's an absurd remark from David J. Kramer, Senior Director for Human Rights, McCain Institute. We must distinguish between true journalists like those at Voice of America, Radio Liberty, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and the people working for RT and Sputnik. But you can get more truth from RT and Sputnik than you can from New York Times and the Washington Post, where Voice of America and Radio Liberty are well-known CIA propaganda sites.
Right.
And if you go to 47, get this. This is a stunner, Bill.
Yeah.
We have Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon.com, and recently bought the Washington Post to turn it into his political plaything as another conduit for propaganda and disinformation. Has, believe it or not, a $600 million contract with the CIA. So you can see which side of the bread his bread is buttered.
He's making a vile and a self-serving narcissistic mistake, because with the new director, Mr. Pompeo of the CIA, with the Trump administration and a group of his, I call Trump's titans, Bezos is going to be exposed, and anything that he's doing that's antitrust is going to be laid bare.
Well, the next slide 48 is a brilliant article by Joachim Hagopian, who published a recent piece on Pizzagate that should be required reading. So go after Joachim Hagopian and check out what he has to say to explain about the way in which the fake news is coming from the mainstream media, which are controlled by the CIA. Here's a very disturbing article now, number 49, from Paul Craig Roberts. As the coup against Trump fails, the threat against his life rises. I'll read a few lines. The use of the prostitute media to deny Trump the Republican presidential nomination failed. The use of the prostitute media to deny Trump victory in the presidential election failed. The vote recount failed. The effort to sway the Electoral College failed, but the effort continues. The CIA report on Russia's alleged interference in the U.S. presidential election, ordered by Obama, is in process. Faked evidence is a hallmark of CIA ops. So he wants this before the inauguration. So the CIA is going to produce a fake report to try to undercut the authenticity of Donald as the choice of the American people, claiming it was Russian hacking. And get this, the final story, stunning in and of itself. We have Sheriff Joe Arpaio from Arizona, who has determined, based upon new research, that Obama's birth certificate is faked. We need the next slide, Bill.
Yeah, that
slide.
Totally makes sense.
Number 50. Yeah. I actually had established that it was fake years and years ago on radiofetzer.blogspot.com, where I had an expert there. I published articles on the Real Deal video show, one entitled Trashing Trump Unjustly, because his claims that Barack Obama was not born in the United States were completely well-founded, that the birth certificate is fake. I've discovered 2 Kenyan birth certificates, one of which appears to be real, the other fake. So they can claim if someone alludes to a Kenyan birth certificate, oh yeah, but it's shown to be fake. He even has Connecticut social security number, which is simply absurd. How would a man born in Hawaii wind up with a Connecticut social security number? He's never lived there. In fact, apparently he has quite a few fake social security numbers. So, Bill, now get this, even Obama lawyers admit the birth certificate is forged, but eligibility is a separate matter, they maintain. How absurd can it get?
Eligible because he's supported by the Saudis, or by, or he's supported by the guy that wrote the Grand Chessboard.
Yeah, Brzezinski.
Yeah.
Because he's the CIA candidate. That's what makes him eligible. Just like Hillary was a CIA candidate. That's what makes her eligible.
Right.
And why it cannot be the case that the American people repudiated her because she was a bad candidate.
Yeah. Amazing. That was an amazing discussion. And of course, I want to repeat at the end what I think got blocked out. That the state of Israel needs to be an ally, but they need to not control our intelligence, that the majority of the people in Israel that are in control are only 2% actual ancient Hebrew blood from the Khazars that used to attack the trade route of the Silk Trail going from Europe to China. They would attack from the South Caucasus Mountains. That the vast majority of Palestinians who unfortunately were put to the scimitar that they had to convert to Islam, 87% are actually ancient blood Hebrews, even though now they're vile Muslim terrorists, pushed by the extreme versions of Wahhabism, which, by the way, originated out of London, England in the 1920s with the Saudi kings. What's going on is a manipulation by the Empire of Britain that created and fostered Wahhabism, and they continue to do so through not only NATO but the United Nations, which was, by the way, a U.S. and British creation to take the 57 nations that are former Commonwealth nations and make them a clenched fist to control the world. So through the banking systems of Europe, which is the Fed system, and we're only one of 6 banks that's at the board, we are controlled by the empire of the rising state of, I call the United States of Europe, and the Haraj, which was in the Albert Pike letter. The Muslim invasion is actually to make sure the Europeans eventually clench their fist, 540 million people in the greater Europe, to come against Islam. It was just part of a global scheme to create a whole new empire, and in fact, our reaction, even by Donald Trump and the creation of his titans, will not only strengthen America, but it'll also create an informational police state, which we have to have in order to protect ourselves from extreme Islam. So all of this has been engineered, and we're always being shepherded, even by our own responses to the situation, into a new state of a higher level of space chess to control us and to make us respond in a way like an animal being hit with a cattle prod. And
it's fascinating, Bill, how Bibi Netanyahu, in response to this vote, didn't acknowledge that the General Assembly had previously passed a similar resolution by 157 to 3, where the 3 in opposition were the United States, Israel, and Micronesia.
Yeah.
And this was a very appropriate move by Barack Obama, one of the few responsible actions he's taken of late. But where Netanyahu insists that this is because everyone's ganging up on Israel, this is supposed to be a form of anti-Semitism, which it manifestly is not, since criticism of the actions and policies of the government of Israel is not remotely anti-Semitic, which entails actually discounting the values of the or worth of a person or his opinions on the basis of his genetic legacy or his religious orientation. In fact, as you are correctly observing, the overwhelming majority of the residents of Israel are descendants of the Khazar region of Eastern Europe, whereas the Palestinians are in fact bona fide Semites, which means that the greatest practitioner of anti-Semitism in the world today, ironically, is the state of Israel.
Yeah, and the solution to that would be return to ancient Hebrew belief systems, which predate the satanic religion of Islam and the pagan religion of modern Judaism. And we've had experts on, like our expert from Texas, that talks about the coiled serpent of the modern Hebrews and Jews. People need to understand that the modern Judaism is at its core is a pagan and a satanic faith now. It is not ancient Hebrew belief systems, and that's what the big problem is. People don't understand that it is, in a sense, poisoning the inside of the politics of America, right?
Bill, I can't thank you enough for featuring me today. I greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Well, I'll get this video up right away on our YouTube and Vimeo channels, as well as mine's, and over on our Deagle network, so we're going to have it on every platform possible. And if people have questions, by the way, they should visit your website, which is moonrockbooks.com. And
they can write me, Bill. They can write me at jim@moonrockbooks.com.
Yeah.
And check out my blog, jamesfetzer.blogspot.com, while they're at it.
Yeah, that's Fetzer. James Fetzer.
Right.
That's great. I appreciate it, Jim. Thank you. And we do these videos at least once a week.
You got it.
By the way, do visit Nutrimedical.com, our main website, and my other website is clayandiron.com. Thank you, Jim.